Seems like just yesterday we were talking about how Ghost Rider had been canceled, kind of a handful, small collection of bits of news. We have some more cancellations to report on, a few more things within comics. Let's wrap up a little bit of what's going on and where things sit. Hey everybody, this is Perch. A few more cancellations to discuss, as well as some comic news. And I think overall, and I'm going to do a session both here on this channel and also over with Wes at Thinking Critical around kind of the future of Marvel with some predictions, because there's a few kind of ominous signs, some good news, some bad news. It's please don't everybody jump to the gun to say, oh my God, the floor is falling out, there's trouble ahead. But there's some storm clouds there around some cancellations and how some things are working that indicates we're seeing a shift in the company. And it may be a very small shift. It may be something that's going to play out over time. But there's some reorganization that's going on. And think of it this way. When DC kind of reorganized themselves, put some digital things in play, changed some of their titles around, shifted death metal to be more expansive, pulled back on the 5G plans, that was a similar shift. And I think we're at the beginnings of seeing that for Marvel as well. It's just, because the news sites and the internet was going so hard at 5G, it was kind of all right in front of our face. And with Marvel, it's happening a little bit more behind the scenes where we may not even be noticing it. But let's get into those cancellations. So first off, Black Cat, which most people, I think, knew that it had been canceled with issue number 12. That comic is over. Black Cat will be part in King in Black, as we've seen, but there will not be a Black Cat number 13. It was solicited, but that's over. We were supposed to see the return of Menace and kind of a tie-in to the old Goblin King and Harry Osborn bit. So that's not happening. So that comic is done. But the more, and by the way, Black Cat had a lot of promotion and a lot of hype after it had a very strong sales of the number one issue. But of course, a lot of those sales were as a result of kind of variants and some incentive programs and other things. And it just goes to highlight the fact that we really need to, when we see these huge numbers and people get all excited about it, and Marvel issues press releases and everything else about how great these titles are doing, you have to dig in a little bit to the truth behind what's actually happening. And how much of it's based on the title? How much of it can we expect ongoing? And also just what does it really mean? It's not enough to just say, hey, here's, it made 100,000 copies, so it's clearly going to be a bestseller. Well, that one issue sold well. But if there were a lot of things, strings attached to get to that number for the first issue, then, guaranteed the second, third, fourth issue are going to plummet, which is what, of course, happened with Black Cat. And so you look at it one of two ways. Either you say, all right, well, what's the sustainability of these titles and what's really going on? Or is Marvel just shifting to a new strategy that's really based around number one issues and events, which you could argue they have been for a few years now, and kind of the ongoing life of these titles is going away? Is this their subtle way to kind of get toward the graphic novel OGN kind of approach, where we just kind of drop, the monthly floppy business and we just kind of move to, single issues and events, and that's just how the way we run it? Interesting strategy. It's a video for another time, but I would add that, if suddenly you shift your business over into just doing a bunch of one-shots and, graphic novels and events, then not all of those one-shots, graphic novels, and events are going to be equal. Right now we're seeing that the events tend to sell better, in relation to everything else. But if you suddenly publish nothing but events, then some events are going to sell well, some will not. I don't know that solves the problem, but it does move it around a bit. Anyway, the other title that's surprising people quite a bit is Doctor Strange. So Doctor Strange ends with an issue number 6. Doctor Strange had an initial run that, again, was a little bit odd. It sent Doctor Strange into space, and it was a different take, written by Mark Waid. And then they canceled it and rebooted it with another number 1 where he kind of went back to being a surgeon, working with Dr. Druid. And it just the first series didn't take really, and the second, the cancellation and relaunch with a new number one definitely didn't take, and it didn't perform well in the shops. Now, what's interesting about all this is the Strange Academy book is still going, and that's a Doctor Strange themed book in theory, written by Scotty Young. And we have a Doctor Strange movie that's coming out someday. I mean, in theory, next year-ish, maybe, who knows? And so Marvel and Disney are clearly going to want to put a lot more emphasis on Doctor Strange. But what's curious, and I think it's just another lesson that probably surprises nobody, is that when you have a big blockbuster movie character like a Doctor Strange, and then you have his comic send Doctor Strange off into space or have adventures that resemble nothing of what's going on in the movie, it's a problem. And we see this time and time again, where you get characters that are radically different in the movies and the comics. And the idea is you shouldn't have to align them completely. You don't have to make all the comics just be the same as the movies, but they should feel vaguely in the same space. You kind of relate to things. And the curious part is the person who gets injured with that is the comics. The movies tend to take a fairly confined, straightforward adventure with the character. They line up a major villain. Typically, they have the entire roster of villains that the character has, and they pick one and they highlight him, as front and center. And oftentimes, and the movie does a terrible job of this, they kill him off within a single movie. But they're all recognizable characters. Are going for quick recognition, quick audience grab, and that's what they're doing. And lately, what Marvel has done is when they have the comic, they decide to do this kind of introspective look at the character. We're going to take the character, we're going to send them in a brand new, never before seen location with some new villains, some often, kind of faceless alien characters that just nobody's really heard of before and we'll hear of again. And they take the big villains, the big moments, the big scenarios that you're used to off the table, and they try and defy expectations by doing something different. But this is a bad strategy. It's a bad strategy in normal times, but definitely when you have a renewed interest in a comic by maybe a casual audience, like a movie-making audience, it just gives people no clear jumping on point, and the stakes just seem way less important than they do in the movies. I mean, you take a look at Captain Marvel. So that movie comes out, and you've got the Kree, you've got the Skrull, you've got the Supreme Intelligence, and granted, all of them very, very differently rendered than what we're used to in the comics. But you still have this sense of an origin story and some threats, and the world's going to get blown up, and all this kind of stuff's going on. Captain Marvel gets to cut loose, show her powers. And meanwhile, over in the comic, we're doing kind of a very down-to-earth story about either her, where her mom actually comes from with characters you don't really recognize. And the stakes just seem much, much lower. But if anything, the stakes should be higher in the comics because you have more characters, more history to draw from, and you're not confined by special effects or budgets. You can go bigger. So it's a weird choice that I think often gets made in comics where, not only does it not resemble the movies, but it also doesn't resemble the stakes and the importance in the movies. But be that as it may, a lot of commentary. So Doctor Strange and Black Cat join Ghost Rider and Strike Force and Agents of Wakanda in the cancellation list. And from what we understand, there's a few more that are coming. So over the next 2 months, we expect for some more comics to disappear. I think there's a handful of ones that haven't really been solicited yet, or they're stumbling along. Those are clearly gonna vanish, and Marvel's continuing to organize. Like I said, I think we're watching the beginning of some pretty significant changes for Marvel that's kind of creeping up on us. I suspect within a month or two, we're going to see those. So that's some commentary that's coming. I'm going to do a video talking about just that and what to look for and kind of what might come out the other end. And you can see it in a couple different places. So, hey, there you go. So do you have any questions? Were you following these two books, Doctor Strange or Black Cat? What would you like to see? Do you want to see them return? Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet, I really appreciate the subscriptions. The channel continues to grow, and I thank you very, very much for that. Send me an email at comicsperch@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter and Facebook as well. But most importantly, thanks for listening.